Ross, who is author of Blood Diamonds and the upcoming sequel novel, BLOODSTONE. And so, Tiffany, how's LibertyCon treating you so far?
It's great. I've already met a bunch of my friends and taken a survivor's photo.
Would you mind telling us just a little bit about, yourself and your background?
I'm a native Texan. I was born in the Texas Panhandle. While I went to college to learn how to do computer animation, it wasn't an actual field at the time. Back in the 90s, when it was hot, but nobody taught it. I wasn't in the right place at the right time, so I went to the next best thing. I went into comics. So I was determined to illustrate my stories, even though I had no idea what I was doing, and learned along the way. So I've been self-employed doing webcomics for over 2 decades, following the birth of my daughter, so I could be home with her while she went through various surgeries as a child and needed more attention. I wasn't going to trust her to a daycare.
You started out as an illustrator. What was it about that drew you to that field?
It would be Marvel and Archie comics. I read them when I was a kid, and I was just very fascinated with the medium itself. I couldn't be an animator, but I could actually do comics on my own. And I learned how to do it back when there were not tutorials all over the internet.
And what was it that drew you to that visual mode of storytelling?
Just being able to see what was in my head on the paper, and I really wanted to see that. I mean, pretty much everybody wants to see that.
So
when you're writing a story.
How did you go from there to, when did you first get that spark of saying, I think I need to start writing, doing just prose?
Because I never divided them in the start. I actually did a webcomic with a novelized version, but there wasn't as much instruction back then. So I kind of fell off of doing it because I knew that there was something wrong, but I didn't know how to fix it. And I couldn't afford the education to find this out. And there weren't tutorials all over the internet like there are now.
Okay, and so when did you first start writing prose?
I've been doing that since even in school. I mean, I used to bypass the lovely standardized testing by writing as much as I possibly could and sounding like I knew what I was writing about. And that worked every time. And that's basically what writing a novel is.
And so how did you start to get into publishing? What were some of your first published works?
I published some webcomic collections because it became available through Amazon. And, at the time it was cheap and easy, and it was much more efficient than it is now for some reason. Back then it was Create Space, now it's KDP, and everybody has their complaints about KDP. I don't even want to mess with them anymore. Even though, I have gone through and I've looked at the process for publishing, in bulk. That's just not feasible at the moment. So that's where going to a publisher came in.
And so you're a member of the writers group Alpha Marks. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
This is a writers group that came out of Larry Correia's podcast, which he doesn't do anymore, sadly. And for some reason, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head.
Writer Dojo.
Writer Dojo, yes. And he had done it one on writers groups. And so we had Facebook access to just a special selected group of people. And we suddenly got together, and there were one of them, I believe it was, one person said, let's get this together and work together. And then about 10 people got together and said, yeah, we'll do this. We'll go to Facebook, make a group, start critiquing each other, and learn along the way. And that's basically what we did. We learned along the way, and we somehow stumbled right into the perfect way to do critiquing. And the perfect way to do critiquing to help you improve is to do the critiquing.
You drop these little nuggets of gold every time you talk about the methodology of writing, and I love something you said to me at this last PCon was that writing and storytelling are two separate skills.
They are. I mean, you have authors who can tell a good story, and you have authors that can communicate that story very well, and they are two different arts to learn. If you can do one, you can probably get by a little ways. You might even become a bestseller. But if you can do two, you'll be memorable. I mean, that's like talking about Tolkien.
And so what's some of the best advice or feedback you've gotten from the Alpha Marks?
I mean, their criticism is good and personal. I mean, it's basically no holds barred. We state exactly what it is that we see, and we do not spare feelings. And that's important. I mean, yes, we're a little bit polite because we don't want to scare away newbies, but the longer you do it, the more you understand how to take a critique as well as give one. And you understand, you don't have to take everything that you're told.
And your copy editor for Raconteur Press has been Rita Beeman, and she's a close friend of mine. And she kind of she says, I feel like I'm not doing anything with your book, because she says it's so clean. And you also do something that's extremely helpful for us as well. Is you turn in like a story Bible, and you turn in notes. And I know you've talked about beat sheets. Could you talk about those a little bit?
Now, beat sheets are not something you really have to follow. It's good to know them for if you get stuck, you want to be able to reorient yourself, and using a beat sheet usually works that way. You can go back and look, and you most likely naturally meet the beats in the beat sheet. Because beats just an activity in your story. And a lot of people do it naturally because you've already absorbed this in regular storytelling through reading and watching movies, even watching TV. Every single 30-minute episode of TV has a beat sheet, and you start to recognize the patterns. And sometimes you start to mimic them, and then you figure out how to do it without being seen. That's important.
How do beat sheets help you as a writer?
Well, for me, it was more of showing me what I'd already done. Because the first time I looked at a beat sheet, I was like, what is this? I don't understand what I'm supposed to do. And then it took some time. When, I've learned that if you don't understand the first time, wait a little while and return to it, and you might understand it later. And so I started to understand when I found a specific beat sheet, and that is the romancing the beat, which is a very common one used for all kinds of stories, not just romance. It is basically, hero's journey right there. And it is easy to follow, and I have looked at it and gone, oh, this is what I'm doing. And this is where I am in the story, and I don't count pages because that would drive me crazy. I just do it by feel, and I know there are quite a few people that do that.
Yeah, it sounds like kind of like a map for the writer, so you don't get lost in where you are with the plot. Basically, is that kind of how it feels for you?
Yes, and you need to trust yourself when you start working on something like that. That's where I go into your subconscious actually knows this information. And it has stored, everything you have seen, read, and heard is right there. You may have already gone through all these beat sheets 1,000 times. They're in your head. You don't have to purposely pull them out. They will spill out.
I love. You're giving me hope. So, and I know the Mercs are very closely. A lot of them have started to publish with Raconteur Press. How did you make that? How did you get affiliated with Raconteur?
Oh, well, they opened up for anthologies, and after I had heard that anthologies are no longer a thing, I had heard this is the way that authors used to get known. And then I was like, yeah, I have collections of authors, old books, old stories, and yeah, it's too bad that doesn't exist anymore. And then Alpha Mercs opened up, and then they started pushing toward the anthologies, and I decided, you know what, maybe this is a good place to step forward and see what we can do. If anything, it's practice, because none of this time will be wasted.
Okay, and so what was the first anthology you submitted to for Raconteur?
That would be All Will Burn. Every time one clicked, I went for it. I even went for things that I wasn't very good at or didn't know enough about to do. And just, it's all experience. There's no wasted words, and we'll use those stories for something else, even if they didn't fit their calls. But it was very encouraging to be published repeatedly, and then being told that, oh, we can't wait to get your next story.
This is a trilogy, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so we've got Blood Diamonds, we've got Bloodstone, and you said you don't have a name for your trilogy, but your universe is named what?
It's called Boons and Mains.
Okay, so would you tell us a little bit about Blood Diamonds and Bloodstone?
So when I wrote Blood Diamonds, I went into it going, what if both my MCs are the Beauty and the Beast? So I like writing dual MCs. And I really like a female MC and a male MC. I kind of feel like male MCs are they're not as seen as frequently as they used to be in just general novels. Yes, you get them in the military, science fiction, and sci-fi, but I just wanted to write a good old-fashioned novel. And I wanted to know, how does that work? Why is it like that? And then all the lore I'd learned over the years popped up on the top of my favorite fairy tale. Yeah, I remember reading Beauty and the Beast for the first time, how I felt so emotional about the ending. And I'm talking about the original one, not the Disney version. And you know, how it's changed, gone through the years since the Beast dies in the original. Sorry, it's a spoiler. That's grim for you. I didn't even plan to write an alternate retelling of the story. I really didn't. But there are echoes of it throughout the book. I've done this with The Little Mermaid several times now and didn't even realize it until my CP laughed and pointed it out. He wrote a reverse Little Mermaid, only he refuses to talk, but he can. So I world build as I write, and I didn't want the usual curse. I had to come up with a good reason that Verity was driven to protect her home so fiercely. And out of nowhere, the vision came of blood, flesh, and bone, literally turning into precious gems. She couldn't escape the curse no matter what she did, and that wasn't the curse. No, that was a meddling, awful god, with a little g. I didn't even start with wanting to involve gods. I'd actually managed to avoid ever mentioning one, because Greek gods are so overused, and I wasn't interested in treading even more overused tropes than my were creatures. But I'm glad I did, because they opened up an entire new pathway of a race of people who are all human, just like my sevenths, who are gifted because they were born seventh in an unbroken line of girls or boys, or their children. People cursed by their birth order, or were they? By the time I got to Bloodstone, I had an epiphany of the purpose of the sevenths and the gods. See, I didn't have this in the first book, but they were meant for a time when Titans, Nephilim, walked the earth. They fought side by side once, with the gods being champions for humanity. When the fallen angels were locked away and the Nephilim defeated, they lost their purpose. And what would a powerful human do if they had no purpose and were left to their own devices with great abilities and are almost immortal? Some would try to reign as gods to humanity, taking on guises in different civilizations. They spread out, but none of them really wanted to make the ultimate act of outright rebellion and try to rule humanity. They'd seen what happened when that occurs, so they still retain the purpose to at least try not to harm humanity in general. So as the world marches on, they're getting left behind. Many of the myths they began or contributed to are full of added human interventions and outright rumors and lies. However, the core group remains very much like they've always been. Zeus is out fathering children as often as he can get away with it. Poseidon rules the seas with an iron grasp, forcing nations into frequent beauty contests to send him new wives for safe passage over his depths. Hades is running a hidden land full of lost souls. Not dead people, no. Those who should have died and were rescued by his shadow court. Oh, and this gave me an opportunity to do something even more fun. Eventually, I get to entangle tall tales into this world along with all the fantasy creatures, gods, and hunters, and anything I could ever want to write.
And so you've said that this trilogy that you're writing it's going to be a bit of a multiverse. Basically, it's not going to be just these 3 books, it's going to actually kind of expand.
Yes, I will have books set a little bit later in the future. I am plotting for either World War I or World War II. I'm also plotting for expansion into Texas, because there are lots of fun tall tales there to explore. That will be its own little trilogy. And then I have the modern day, where everything has been wiped away and reset as new, where history is exactly as we know it. But anybody who's read these other trilogies will know that history isn't what it actually is. And then we're going to go on a new adventure that's all fresh from that point on.
And what is it about fairy tales that attracts you to that style of storytelling?
I don't know, they've always been really heartfelt and emotional. I mean, that's what you grow up hearing. They're short, they're punctual. They have a moral, even though, I don't try to force morals or anything like that. If there's a moral there, it just happened to be there. It's just part of who the characters are.
And you like to have this sort of play on sort of time. You like to jump around with history, and what is it about that you like to do?
there are certain periods of time that are just good points in history. Now, for Blood Diamonds, this is 1887. Now, 1887 is right before the real emergence of electricity, where that really changes the world. And you know, that's also just about 20, 30 years before the automobile comes around, or helicopters or airplanes. And it seemed like a great setting for a little bit of steampunk. But I didn't want to do steampunk, so I'm doing gas lamp, which is like steampunk with magic. And the time period is because I have a 16-year-old MC, male MC, and at this age, 16-year-old boys can just go hop on a horse and go do whatever they want to. They are considered pretty much adults, and he can go anywhere his horse can take him. And he get into trouble, and he has to work his way out of that trouble. But the adventure is right there. There's no adults standing around saying, you know, what are you doing? Where are your parents? And that's just an attractive time period. And, you know, the modern day is attractive for other reasons because I can deconstruct it if I want to, and nobody really minds that as much as, you know, if you deconstruct other areas and that start, you know, introducing a lot of fake history, which I'm actually not even doing fake history. I will use as much real, actual history as I possibly can because I like grounding, I guess you could say, a mistruth in the truth. And the best way to do that is to anchor it to a historical point or event that actually happened. I mean, that's as simple as just looking at the weather for any particular day and where I'm writing it.
Yes, I remember you were working at, again, to speak about that last pecan, you're a very heavy researcher. And what is it about that aspect of writing that you like, that you like to dig in so deeply?
I like learning. I mean, I've always liked learning. I love history. I don't like dates. I really hate dates. So I'm always, you know, looking and researching that. Yes, I use ChatGPT and say, look, what happened to this date? What is this location? What can happen at this location? Or, you know, what was the weather on this day? And usually I can go and double check that quicker, but it focuses it. And, you know, just the research also spurs new ideas, such as what I'm about to write. I went and looked and it was like, what is the weather like in the winter of 1888? Oh, it's horrible. It is like one of the coldest winters in American history. And, you know, rain, ice, all that good fun stuff. And I'm sending kids over an ocean.
And could you tell us a little bit about your characters?
September is like, I consider him more of an ideal male character. You know, he would be considered toxically masculine by the modern day because he is willing to help somebody and save them and rescue them without them asking for it. But sometimes you can't ask for it. And in this case, Verity has been trapped in a time curse that has kind of altered her mind because it turns her into a beast that is driven to protect her land. And to protect her land, she must kill everyone that comes onto it. And he comes on there, but he's coming there for to seek a little bit of peace from his own curse, which isn't technically a curse either. I mean, it's just who he is. He's a seventh. And in the general line of sevenths, you know, the seventh son of a seventh son of a seventh son turns into a werewolf. In my world, they turn into shifters of some kind. It's culturally dependent because every culture has a different shifter. That means my Native Americans, they shift into stags and deer and bears and, you know, buffalo, good, cool things. And then I have a lion shifter upcoming, and he's awesome. But Sept is a wolf. And so when he first shows up, he's trying to get some relief because he's heard the time stand still at this mansion. And so he just wants to go there to have a break. Because once a month, and he states this very plainly, he turns into a very stupid wolf that's like more like a dog than a wolf, and that his older brothers have taught him plenty of tricks. And so he just wants to be normal for a little while. And then he encounters Verity, who he understands is trapped with her family who are stuck in beast modes. because they are children of sevens, a third generation sevens woman, and so they inherit all of her abilities plus a few extras. Yes, they are a fourth generation, which is a very rare thing. Sept is a third generation. And so Verity she is protective. She is one of those women that, she's only 18. She feels like the whole weight of the world is on her to protect her family. And it is her against everything. And it's not just the whispering voices in her head that are driving her to do this. It is because she really wants to protect her the 12-year-old sister and her tiny little brothers who are 6 and 7. And they're not like her. They're beastly, but they're more of the hairy wolfman type. They're not full monsters. And they're kind of cute and delicate. And the little girl, Alethea, takes to Sept and rescues him when Verity attacks him and tries to kill him. But his horse chases her off. And then her sister and brother just pick him up and bring him back into the mansion where he's safe. And she can't do anything to him because he's on the grounds. And that's just, she's so frustrated that he's there, and he's going to help her no matter what. Once he figures out that she has a problem and that she really cannot ask for help.
Who are your villains? Who do you have?
Oh, my first villain. He is Zeus. Because I'm not going to state exactly why he's the villain, but he does want Verity for a reason. And whatever that is, it's pretty nasty because he's put her under this curse, and he comes back every year, and he's done it for almost 50 years, that he wants her to willingly come with him. And she believes that she will lose her soul if she agrees to what he has stated. But like I said, she can't ask for help. And nobody wants to fight a god. Even the sevens do not want to mess with the gods because they are nasty. They are every bit as mythic as they're represented as. And to fight one takes a large number of people. And you just don't want to go stumbling upon one, especially not Zeus, because he's got electricity and all kinds of nasty shape-shifting abilities, and he's just nasty in general. And he keeps a lovely amount of records about every single kid he has ever fathered, and he goes and checks up on them frequently. Keeping to the lore, he's still doing that, and there's a reason he's doing that.
And these are the same characters throughout the trilogy?
Yes.
Will we read about them? Okay.
Yes.
And what is it you love? What is it you have loved about writing about them, and what do you love about this project?
I love the aspect of the duality. Even in the magic system, I actually got to create a magic system that was a little bit different. That is basically, they create one item, and when they create an item, it's called the boon. And in the creation of the first item, it creates a second item that's called a bane. And while the boon may do exactly what it's supposed to do, the bane can have any kind of opposite effect, or it can have something completely random. I mean, it's as much as like creating a flashlight. This flashlight lights up a room, follows you around and does all that good stuff. And the bane, it follows you around and casts everything in darkness. That could actually be useful in certain situations.
And is there anything I haven't asked that you'd like to discuss about your stories?
I want readers to see the whimsy and wonder in just about every situation. As I'm writing that, I'm thinking about the first Hellboy movie. They have to take out a monster that's essentially a nature god. And in that scene, you get a sense of sadness and wonder that you wouldn't get if it was a standard horror or monster movie. You honestly feel bad for the creature being used as a weapon when it's only following its nature and it isn't aware of what it's doing. This might be part of why I write horror with an air of wonder and horror at the same time. I've read books with similar beats where decisions must be made, and sometimes the monster isn't quite what it's originally made out to be. Yeah, you can't try to talk them all down, but at least have some respect for what you're destroying when it deserves it, and don't be so lost and dark that you can't even see it. I want to do the unexpected right in the middle of the darkness. Light in general shines brightest in that setting. I don't do lessons, really I don't. If they pop in because I have parents trying to raise their children. Even if they're adult children, the parents still have something insightful and valuable to say. Sometimes the kids even realize it for what it is. Now, I don't really try to do these things. The opportunity simply arises and it's on the paper before I even realize what's there.
Tiffany, thank you. Thank you so much. I learned so much about writing every time we talk, so thank you for that. And we're so excited about Blood Diamonds, Bloodstone, and what's the third of the trilogy called?
Right now it's called Sapphire Seas, but it will probably change to go in line with the rest of them.
Excellent. So, Boots and Bane's universe, it's not just a trilogy, it's going to be more.
Yes.
It's going to be more. So, we're here at the LibertyCon, and I'm with Tiffany Ross. So,
Hello.